Today, a global outage for users of Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp. What's possibly behind it? Supply chain disruptions are pushing American producers to bring production home. But are American workers ready to build? We talked to one manufacturer. That and much more coming up on NTD Business. Good evening. Great to have you with us. I'm Paul Graney. Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp have been down for hours. I hope you're not getting withdrawal symptoms. Down Detector says the problem is global, and we can confirm they've been offline at NTD's offices in New York City all afternoon. Facebook owns all three of the apps, and its CTO just tweeted out that they're experiencing networking issues, but didn't elaborate. Several techies pointed out that it looks like a domain name system or DNS error. DNS allows web addresses to take users to the destinations. Apparently, it's even affected Facebook employees' office key cards, and if it is DNS, possibly the company's email addresses too. One aviation association is forecasting airlines will lose nearly $52 billion this year. It's worse than previously thought. The group also expects airlines to lose $11.5 billion next year before finally returning to profit in 2023. Last year's numbers were also worse than expected, despite a $25 billion federal bailout. Add to that the CDC recommending not to travel this holiday season if you're not fully vaccinated. And cleanup is now underway for a massive oil spill in California. It just happened over the weekend. Over 100,000 gallons of oil covered over 6 miles of water, killing fish and covering the beaches with tar. We now have details on what happened. NTD's Faye Quarter explains.
The city of Huntington Beach, California confirms that Beta Offshore, a subsidiary of Amplify Energy Corporation, is responsible for the oil spill.
It was a leak in a pipeline that is decades old that traveled to a platform. And so they've cut off the valve, or they've shut off the valve rather, and then they capped the pipeline, and they have divers going down, like you said, and trying to repair it.
Katrina Foley is the supervisor of Orange County where the spill took place. She says the spill has had tremendous impact on both their environment and their economies.
We are pouring all resources available from the county, from the local cities, Huntington Beach, Newport Beach, Laguna Beach, as well as our Orange County Sheriff's Department Harbor Patrol. We are all in.
An estimated 126,000 gallons were spilled into Huntington Beach and Newport Beach, covering around 6 miles. The beaches are covered in tar and dead fish, and workers are rushing to clean up the spill. Temporary floating barriers are used to contain the oil. Amplify Energy's stock immediately nosedived over 50%.
It's a tough situation. I do give the company credit for quickly holding a news conference and vowing to take this seriously and to go to the ends of the earth to really try to make it right and mitigate the damage.
Evan Neerman is founder of crisis management firm Red Banyan. He says the company needs to counter the images people will see on their screens, such as those of tar on the sands, oil in the water, and affected animals.
If I were advising the company, I would tell them you need to get some camera crews out there with your workers as they're sucking up the oil, minimizing the environmental damage, and trying to make things right.
The oil also reached Talbert Marsh, a local ecological reserve. Amplify Energy says all of its Beta Offshore operations have been shut down and that it's cooperating with local authorities. Faye Quarter, NTD News.
And the head of vaccine maker BioNTech says we might need new vaccines next year for the next generation of COVID variants. BioNTech's CEO told the Financial Times that the new strains of the CCP virus will likely be able to evade vaccines. He says this virus will stay and the virus will further adapt, so the next vaccines will have to be tailored to the upcoming changes. Other pharmaceutical company executives, including Pfizer's CEO, also predict new variants that are able to breach the vaccines. And it seems like Americans are still overpaying for medicine. New data shows it outspent every other country in the world combined on the most popular 20 drugs. U.S. spending was more than $100 billion, while the rest of the world spent less than $60 billion. The key findings indicate U.S. consumers overpay for drugs because Americans don't necessarily take more than other countries. Globally, the top 20 best-selling drugs brought in about $160 billion, with the U.S. accounting for almost 2/3 of the revenue. You could call the U.S. a cash cow for the big pharma, which is one reason it may be fighting efforts to reduce drug prices. And the trial begins today in Cleveland of 4 big pharmacy chains caught up in America's opioid crisis. 2 Ohio counties sued them for flooding their communities with addictive pills. Walgreens, CVS, Walmart, and Giant Eagle are accused of not doing enough to control the amount of pills entering the community. More than 500,000 have died from overdoses from 1999 to 2019, and thousands of similar lawsuits against pharmaceutical companies, drug distributors, and pharmacies are also pending. The 4 pharmacy chains say they did nothing wrong, but if they're found liable, the settlement could cost them billions of dollars. And President Biden is scheduled for Michigan tomorrow to build support for his economic agenda. Last week, the vote on the bipartisan infrastructure bill was delayed twice, likely because there wasn't enough support even within his own party. Now, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is pushing it back to the end of the month. NTD's Jessica Beatty reports.
Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer said Sunday the new goal is to get both spending bills done in the next month. The obstacle? Coming up with a number for the larger social spending bill that progressive and moderate Democrats can agree on. The White House working with lawmakers to scale back President Biden's agenda to get more people on board. A top advisor says not everyone will be happy.
People will be disappointed. People will not get everything they want. That is the art of legislating. But the goal here is to get both bills, and we're going to fight until we get both bills.
Moderate Senator Joe Manchin said he won't go above $1.5 trillion on the social spending bill. But the chair of the Progressive Caucus told CNN that's not even close.
Well, that's not going to happen. So it's going to be somewhere.
Why won't it add up to that
Because
number?
that's too small to get our priorities in. So it's going to be somewhere, between 1.5 and 3.5. And I think the White House is working on that right now.
Progressive Senator Bernie Sanders told ABC Sunday he thinks $3.5 trillion should be the minimum, but he accepts there'll have to be give and take. He later told NBC he thinks both bills will eventually pass.
So this is not a wish list. This is what the working families of this country want and what the economy needs. But the question now is whether the Democrats can come together, and I think that we can.
While the new deadline gives Democrats more time to negotiate, moderate Kyrsten Sinema believes it could hurt momentum for Republican support for the smaller bipartisan infrastructure bill. Jessica Beatty, NTD News.
And infrastructure or no infrastructure, America's manufacturing sector had a strong showing in August, powering ahead despite shortages of raw materials and labor. Commerce Department says new orders for American-made goods increased 1.2% between July and August. They're up 18% from a year earlier. Electronic products, transportation equipment, and fabricated metal products all saw a bump. Machinery and primary metal orders did decrease, though. A separate ISM report shows strong manufacturing activity in September too, but the hurdles in the form of supply chain problems, including record-long raw materials lead times, rising commodity prices, and shipping difficulties. So joining us to discuss the latest manufacturing data is Nicole Walter, president of HM Manufacturing. Nicole also sits on the board of directors for the National Association of Manufacturers. Nicole, pleasure to see you. Thanks so much for coming on. We see new orders up 1.2% again for the month. It's an incredible rally it's been on. Where is the demand coming from, and are manufacturers able to keep up?
So the demand is starting to become localized. There's such an initiative now for the reshoring. And so I've seen a lot of my customers start to grow, start to do things more internally. I produce a lot of stuff for the industrial OEMs. So a lot of food processing, beverage, packaging equipment is starting to really ramp up. And it's been great to see, but unfortunately, it's just so hard to keep up. It's just been so difficult. I can't get people to want to work, stay working a lot of the times. And so it's been rough. A lot of my suppliers have the same issue with workforce. And so what's really keeping things from really moving right now seems to be the workforce.
The reshoring part, this is really interesting because this is something we started to hear about last year when the factories closed in China. I wasn't sure if people had really taken up on the opportunity. When have you really seen this shift start to happen?
I would say it was the tail end of 2020, and there really started to be a robust demand in 2021. A lot of the packaging equipment that we were doing, a lot of the subcomponents, things that we would only do maybe 40, 60 times a year in terms of components, whether it was timing belt pulleys or gears or gearboxes. At this point, I'm already at 120 EAU and it's still not stopping. So, you're seeing an increase by 50%, 75%, even as low as 30%. But the increase is just amazing. But when you don't have enough staff and you're kind of backloaded, it's really hard to keep up. And so it's been great to see, obviously, keeping things in-house. A lot of the reshoring initiatives have been fantastic. But right now we're working a lot of hours just to try to keep up, and there's just no ability to do so.
An incredible roller coaster. Finally, I want to touch on something a little bit more nuanced while I have you here. Your background is in chemicals, at least partly in chemicals. I've read that some chemical traders have talked about the difficulty in sourcing actual chemicals, particularly as things have started to unwind a little bit in China. We have the power cuts, etc. Have you looked into this, and how serious is the problem?
I think it's quite serious. I mean, something as little as chlorine for pool is really difficult to source and to find. And especially when I'm talking about the platers that do black oxide, different sorts of plating, they're having a really hard time trying to find those chemicals to do those certain baths to alkaline into our pulleys that can make it so it can go into the food processing equipment without any issues. And the problem is that not only is it harder to find, we're also having to pay a premium because they can't get it. And so it's just such a backlog of so many different things that you're going to have to do to pay for it in order to get it to your dock. And then, unfortunately for us, we can't float those costs. So we have to pass that on to our customer, who eventually passes that on to the consumer. So it's just like a very vicious cyclical cycle right now. And it's really terrible. Like you said, it's a roller coaster. I feel like a lot of people would like to get off. But until we can really start getting things figured out here in the States of how we can start making these chemicals to start helping out, it's going to be quite difficult. And I will say there are some platers that say they can't do certain types of services just because they don't have enough chemicals to make that kind of batch.
That's just incredible. Very finally, so do you feel, let's say in the medium term, this is an opportunity for America? Do you feel that a lot of this type of thing will get reshored?
Yes, we have to. I mean, I think this pandemic really showed how weak we are, as I said earlier, and we need to start figuring out how to keep things internalized just in case these things start to happen. You're seeing a lot of workforce affected. You're seeing a lot of companies affected and a lot of products affected because of that. I was just the other day in Bed Bath & Beyond, and those shelves were completely empty. And so what does that say about what's really happening? I know off the ports of LA, there are so many ships that are stranded and will be stranded for a few more weeks. And so that puts a huge damper on not just the consumer, but for the manufacturer ourselves. I mean, there's a lot of things that I'm waiting for in terms of bearings and set screws that I can't get. And so we've had to go back to our customer and ask to see if we can kind of do something different. Can we offer another way of doing your service and your product just so we can keep going? I have a lot of inventory that's still in WIP and I can't get it out because I'm waiting for certain parts still.
That's incredible. You're not the first manufacturer to have told us. Nicole Walter, HM Manufacturing, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
And technology companies think Facebook led a broad slide on stocks on Wall Street today. The Dow dropped 324 points, about 0.9%. S&P 500 fell 57 points, 1.3%. The tech-heavy Nasdaq lost 311 points today, over 2%. And Venezuela has launched its second monetary overhaul in 3 years. The country just cut 6 zeros from its bolivar currency in response to hyperinflation. The plan seeks to make accounting more straightforward at businesses and banks, where systems can no longer handle the huge figures. The move simplifies accounting but does little to ease Venezuela's economic crisis. Venezuela's year-on-year inflation is over 1,700%. It'll be the third time the socialist country has removed multiple zeros from its currency. And trading shares at China's struggling property developer Evergrande was stopped today. It says it's going to announce a major transaction. Meanwhile, another real estate company, Hobson Development, also suspended trading of its shares pending a major announcement too. But we can't confirm if the two are related, but it's possible. Analysts say the possible sale is a sign Evergrande hasn't given up in its fight to survive. It's trying to raise cash for the short term. Its liabilities are worth about 2% of China's entire GDP, so its woes are concerning for the country's financial system, not to mention the potential knock-on effects around the world. Though China's central bank did promise to protect home buyers' interests, in China at least. And the Biden administration plans to keep Trump-era policies in place as it reins in China's unfair trade practices. The top trade rep says she'll talk to her Chinese counterpart as China fails to make good on its purchasing promises in 2020. NTD's Patrick Hayden has details on its new plan released today.
U.S. Trade Representative Catherine Tai on Monday set out the Biden administration's new strategy on trade relations with China.
For too long, China's lack of adherence to global trading norms has undercut the prosperity of Americans and others around the world. In recent years, Beijing has doubled down on its state-centered economic system.
China's state command economy has increased, and free market principles have taken more of a back seat. This as concerns about human rights abuses increase, most notably in China's region of Xinjiang, where the administration deems genocide is happening.
It is increasingly clear that China's plans do not include meaningful reforms to address the concerns that have been shared by the United States and many other countries.
China failed to deliver on a Trump-era Phase 1 trade deal, in which China agreed to buy $200 billion of U.S. goods during this and last year.
The United States still keeping pedal to the metal, pressure on China so that using the tariff leverage as a way to force the Chinese Communist Party to recognize that this administration is not going to be very much different in comparison with the previous administration.
China met about 58% of its purchase commitments in 2020 and 69% this year to August. U.S. agriculture benefited the most, with about 92% of targets reached.
The Chinese Communist Party and the Chinese government are basically pressuring U.S. multinationals, U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and business groups have been pressuring the Biden administration to let these tariffs go, so that we can go back to the old normal, which was basically no leverage with China.
The Biden administration has maintained tariffs on nearly $360 billion worth of Chinese goods, enacted by the previous administration. It says it will be extending tariff exclusions on certain Chinese goods, but won't be pursuing a Phase 2 agreement with Beijing. Patrick Hayden, NTD News.
And still to come this evening. The man who explored space as Captain Kirk on TV and film is headed out on a real-life space mission. He'll be the oldest person to ever do it. And a Russian businessman turns fish skin into leather clothing and accessories. It's in a bid to make stylish products and reduce waste in the ocean. That and more coming up on NTD Business.
%90 of news outlets in the United States are controlled by 6 corporations. They're not out to tell you the truth of what's happening. They're out to tell you the picture of the world that they represent. The mission of the Epoch Times is to chase the truth, to ground all statements in facts and prevent people from being misled. This is a battle between truth and deceit. Subscribe today and join the Americans who are seeking truth and tradition. We'd love to have you on board.
The final end. The end of mankind. The end of this wretched world. I came as a man of peace and the world bought it. Can you believe that? They even took the mark of the beast. Fools! Why did God even make human beings?
To glorify his name. But we were fools, and many will spend eternity in hell. May God have mercy on their souls.
But fools are fools are fools. Satan loves fools, and so do I.
Welcome back. The man who spent so much time in space as the captain of Starship Enterprise is set to make a real-life space journey. William Shatner plans to fly on the next Blue Origin space tourist flight, the company's second ever. He should be floating above Earth by October 12th. Shatner has played Captain Kirk in Star Trek movies, TV shows, and cartoons since 1966. He's 90 years old and will be the oldest person to ever go to space. Blue Origin had its first space flight in July, carried company founder Jeff Bezos and 3 other passengers over 66 miles high. And Encode Justice is an international group of activists pushing for ethical use of artificial intelligence technology. Its founder says it could stifle free speech, so she told NTD's Evelyn Lee more about the dangers of AI this morning before heading to high school.
Facial recognition is becoming more common in the U.S. It's now being applied in retail stores, schools, and theaters, among other public places. A high school student saw the potential danger in the technology and leapt into action.
And I think that it's sort of growing into this ever expanding creep of surveillance that really is going to chill free expression, that really is going to end up suppressing our speech and our expression in the long term.
Encode Justice is an international group of high school and college students pushing for ethical use of artificial intelligence. Sneha Revanur, a 16-year-old, is the founder. In the U.S., facial recognition is sometimes applied to predict how likely it is for someone to commit another crime. But Revanur found that algorithms used in pretrial decisions could be inaccurate.
California was actually considering a ballot measure to mandate the use of this exact same algorithm statewide. At the pretrial stage, I leapt into action.
And that's when she founded Encode Justice. She started off with 15 other teenage volunteers. Today, the group has grown.
We are made up of about 250 high school and college students from around the world, over 35 states and 25 countries, and we have an executive team of about 15 students.
The accuracy of facial recognition technologies is a concern today. A study in 2019 showed that it especially has trouble recognizing Black and Asian faces. At least 3 men have been wrongfully arrested. And in China, the technology is widely used to surveil citizens and to pick out and target Uyghur minorities. Nevertheless, Revanur says she doesn't want to stifle AI development. She says when there are appropriate safeguards and controls on its use, it could be the solution to many pressing issues. Evelyn Lee, NTD News.
And ready or not, the holiday shopping season has begun. Amazon has rolled out some of its best Black Friday deals ever. On Monday, it announced deep discounts across every category for select days in October and November. It'll also add new deals for customers throughout the next 2 months. Black Friday traditionally falls on the Friday after Thanksgiving. And you could call it fishy couture. One Russian businessman is turning fish skins into leather, which is then used to produce clothing and accessories. It's one way to recycle what would otherwise be thrown away. NTD's Andrew Thomas has the story.
These colorful leathers are tanned fish skins produced by entrepreneur Alexander Vasanev. He's been producing and selling fish skins for 3 years.
Fish skin, its scale structure, it's like a human fingerprint. Each one is individual. So we on the one hand rid the planet of waste, of dirt, and allow the fish processing industry to turn waste into revenue, however small it may be. And on the other hand, we make each one unique.
The raw material is waste from the fish processing industry. Fish waste dumped into the ocean reduces oxygen at the bottom, and it can introduce non-native diseases and invasive species. Vasanev is the founder of Ryby Mech, which means fish fur in Russian. He was trained as a chemist.
It's an interesting story when students came to me and said there is the fish skin. I looked and said, what cool stuff. Looked at its structure, I loved it all. I invested my first money, about 3 million rubles. It was my first investment.
The skin is soaked in special chemical solutions, cleaned and strengthened with the help of natural tanning agents.
The trick here is that the scales are coming off, but the chemicals are so very delicate that you can take the skins out of the solution without gloves.
Then the fish leather is dyed and varnished by hand. Painted in a variety of colors, the leathers are transformed into sewing bags, wallets, belts, clothes, and even shoes. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
What do you think? That's the latest business updates for today. You can still catch NTD Evening News, though, with Stephanie Cox. That's at 6:30 p.m. Eastern. For NTD Business, that's all for today. Thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.